Mikhail gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to remain calm, though his heart was pounding in his chest. He was filled with joyful anticipation. The evening promised to be special. Tonight, he had the rare chance to spend the night at home. Lately, he had been working night shifts due to time zone differences with foreign partners. He didn't warn his wife he was coming, he wanted to surprise her. On the way, he bought her favorite lilies and a bottle of good wine. The drive home passed quickly. He imagined walking in, hugging his beloved wife, and spending a cozy evening together. Both he and Olga earned well and were building a comfortable life. That's why any moment of peace together felt so precious. When he finally pulled up to their countryside house, his joy dimmed. Her car wasn't there. Probably out on errands, he thought. It made him uneasy, but he knew her job sometimes required late client meetings. Entering the house, he felt a strange, heavy loneliness. He dialed her number, holding his breath. After a few rings, she answered. Her voice was distant and cold. Hi, Olga. Where are you? I got off work early and came home, he said cheerfully. There was a long pause. I won't be home tonight, she said. What do you mean? You're not coming home. Should I repeat myself? She snapped with irritation. I said I won't be back. Urgent work stuff. Don't bother me. I'll come tomorrow. Her harsh, indifferent tone caught him off guard. Mikhail barely contained his frustration. Why are you talking to me like this? His voice trembled with pain and disappointment. We'll talk when I'm back, she said and hung up. He stood alone in the empty house, surrounded by silence that grew darker by the minute. The next morning, Mikhail sat at the kitchen table, fingers clenched, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He hadn't slept, replaying their conversation. Suddenly, he saw her car pull up. Olga got out calmly, shut the door, and walked into the house as if nothing had happened. Seeing him in the kitchen, she muttered, "Morning," and headed straight to the bathroom. She didn't even try to explain. Her indifference stoked the fire in him. Mikhail went outside, sat in her car, noticed her dashboard tablet, and opened the GPS history. There was the address where she had spent the night. He opened the glove compartment. Amid the clutter, an open box of condoms, one missing. That was enough. A wave of bitterness and pain surged through him. They hadn't used contraception in a long time, they didn't need it. That fact alone said everything. 25 minutes later, she came out of the bathroom in a silk robe, smiling, towel drying her hair. Her calmness enraged him. He waited. When she sat across from him, he asked. Don't you want to explain? Where were you last night? I told you. It was work-related, she said, annoyed. He tossed the condom box on the table. This part of work too? I checked the GPS. Whose place were you at? She rolled her eyes. Why were you digging in my stuff? Because my wife is acting strange. Because, apparently, she's cheating on me. It wasn't cheating. He almost laughed. You spent the night with another man. And that's not cheating. What, were you watching cartoons? Olga jumped up, furious. It was gratitude. I thanked Igor. It was the first and only time. Mikhail froze. Some gratitude, he muttered. She sat down, avoiding his gaze, her voice soft. I had problems at work. Serious ones. I made mistakes. I could have been fired. I invested so much into that job. It's a good company, great pay. We had plans. Igor covered for me. Money wasn't the issue, he just liked me. He hinted what he wanted in return. She paused. I gave him what he wanted. Just one night. No pleasure. I love you, Mikhail. Please, let's forget this. He sat silently. Forget? She noticed the wine and flowers, opened the bottle, poured 2 glasses, and handed him one. I really love you. Yes, I did something wrong, but sometimes in life, to get further, you have to cross lines. Let's start over. Did he force you? Mikhail asked, already knowing. No. It was my decision. He only hinted. I needed his support. I see, he said quietly, took a sip, and walked outside. The air hit him with a cold breeze. Inside, his rage burned. He couldn't leave it like this. Divorce? Too easy. He'd make them both feel what he felt. A few minutes later, Mikhail returned, calm and composed. You know, he said, I'll try to forget. It's not worth destroying our marriage. Thank you, Mikhail, she smiled. He nodded. Inside, a storm still raged, but outside, calm. She had no idea her understanding husband was already planning a lesson neither she nor Igor would ever forget. On Monday morning, Mikhail drove to work. He remembered something she said. Her company had strict rules about romantic relationships between employees. This was considered a serious violation, and violations of this kind were quickly and irreversibly punished with dismissal. Mikhail understood that going head-on was a path to evidence, and such an initiative could backfire on him. Instead, Mikhail decided to approach the matter more subtly, preparing cover for himself. He met with his boss, Yuri Vitalievich, and asked to be sent on a business trip. Yuri Vitalievich was surprised by the request. Mikhail was a valuable specialist, and he was usually involved in important negotiations with foreign partners, but now, unexpectedly. You're not used to working at a factory, the boss said, raising an eyebrow. Why the sudden desire? Mikhail explained with a slight smile that he was tired of the hectic schedule and wanted a change of scenery. Well, if that's the case, a reboot wouldn't hurt, concluded Yuri Vitalievich, agreeing to prepare the business trip. Olga's reaction was calm, even somewhat indifferent. She wished him good luck, thanked him for informing her, and went to her office. Now, Mikhail's absence wouldn't raise any suspicions. However, this was only the first stage of his plan. The next day, Mikhail found information online about small theater studios that organized various mass events for different projects. Mikhail met with the head of one such studio and laid out his idea. He wanted young people to play the role of random witnesses who would be nearby Olga. The guys were interested in the offer. The idea was amusing but subtle enough not to raise direct suspicion. When the plan was finalized and the script was worked out in detail, Mikhail felt satisfied. Olga couldn't even imagine what was coming for her in the near future, while he already saw her smile fading, giving way to panic and fear. The next early morning, Mikhail left for the business trip. After saying goodbye to Olga, she, as usual, wished him good luck. Olga went to her favorite cafe near the office for coffee and a croissant. The aroma of fresh pastry filled the air, and the familiar atmosphere gave her a sense of comfort. After placing her order, she stood at the counter, waiting for the barista to prepare her coffee. Just as Olga reached for her cup, a young man in a business suit approached her. He gave her a careful look, as if recognizing her. Then a slight, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his face. "Oh, it's you," he exclaimed with feigned enthusiasm. "I recognized you. You're the one who thanks colleagues at work, so to speak, turning boring evenings into something exciting. How generous of you." Olga froze. His words struck her like thunder on a clear day. She stared at him, feeling her heart race. "Excuse me," she mumbled, completely confused. The man smirked. His serious expression suddenly changed to something uneasily cheerful. "That's so generous of you, really. Not everyone is capable of helping their colleagues like that," he added, and without waiting for a reply, turned and left, leaving Olga in complete confusion. She stood frozen for a few more seconds, processing what had just happened. It seemed to her that it was some kind of mistake or a ridiculous coincidence. Shaking herself, Olga grabbed her coffee and croissant and hurried out of the cafe, deciding that it was just an awkward accident. The next day, despite her attempts to forget about the meeting yesterday, Olga headed back to the same cafe, trying to convince herself that nothing special had happened. People sometimes make strange comments, it doesn't mean anything, she thought. But as soon as she approached the counter, he was there again, the man in the business suit. His eyes widened when he saw her, and he broke into a broad smile. "Oh, madam!" he exclaimed with respect and admiration. "I've heard about your generosity, it's truly impressive, sharing yourself for career success. What a real act of self-sacrifice." Olga turned pale. She looked at him, completely confused, feeling a heavy emptiness form in her stomach. "Oh, what are you talking about?" she squeezed out, barely holding back a tremor in her voice. The man simply waved his hand dismissively. "Don't be modest. People like you quickly gain fame, selfless, always ready to help. It's really touching." He smiled at her one last time and walked away. Olga's hands were shaking as she grabbed her coffee. This couldn't be a coincidence. Panic gripped her. Did people know about her? Was it a secret? She tried to calm the growing anxiety. Her thoughts kept returning to that night with Igor, a night that, she thought, no one would ever know about. By the middle of the week, her nerves were at their limit. She tried to convince herself that it was just a silly coincidence, that strangers were just making up wild stories. But the next morning, as soon as she made her order, she was once again addressed. A young woman passing by stopped, smiling. "Oh, you're Olga." "Yes, everyone in your department is talking about how generous you are, especially with the male colleagues. Thanks for your care." Olga felt her breath catch. Grabbing her coffee, she rushed out of the cafe. Her thoughts were in complete chaos. This was no longer a coincidence. For the third time, someone was clearly spreading her secret, and it was spreading. Unable to withstand the tension, Olga took her phone and, hesitating for a moment, dialed Mikhail's number. The ringing seemed endless, making her even more anxious, until he finally answered. "Yes, I'm listening." His voice sounded slightly nervous, which immediately threw Olga off. "Mikhail," she began uncertainly, "I don't know how to explain this, but something strange is happening to me. People are talking about things they shouldn't know." For a moment, there was silence on the line, but then Mikhail seemed to snap back to attention. "Wait, Olga. I don't understand what you're getting at." Irritation was in his voice, as if her suspicions were offending him. Olga went silent, unsure what to respond. I wanted to ask, did you tell anyone about the conflict we had because of that night? Because I don't know how to explain what's happening now. Someone must have shared this information." And then he became even more abrupt. "Didn't we decide to forget about this and leave it in the past? You said that yourself. Why are you stressing me out now? What's wrong with you? Maybe you're just imagining things." Olga felt even worse from his words, as if she were to blame for her past turning into some sort of nightmare. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the suspicion that he knew more than he was letting on. She stumbled, unsure how to explain her state. Then he sharply interrupted her. "You know what, Olga, I've got work. I'm at the factory right now, by the way, busy. Don't mess with my head," and in the next moment, he turned on the video call, allowing her to see his face against the backdrop of a noisy factory floor with machines whirring. "See? I'm here, and you're distracting me with some nonsense. And now you're reminding me of what you did," he added, emphasizing each word. Olga's heart clenched with shame. Sighing, she muttered. "I'm sorry, Mikhail, I'm probably just too nervous." "Just calm down," he replied shortly and disconnected the call, leaving Olga in complete confusion. She thought for a moment. After her conversation with Mikhail, her suspicions turned to Igor. Maybe he told someone about that night. What if he was the one who spread their little secret behind her back? Olga couldn't shake the uneasy thoughts and decided to go straight to Igor. Waiting for the office to empty a little, she quietly entered Igor's office to avoid being noticed. Closing the door behind her, she approached his desk and, leaning in, said, "Igor, you didn't tell anyone about us?" There was panic in her voice. "Are you crazy?" He whispered quickly, glancing at the door as if fearing someone might be listening. "Why are you even asking that? I haven't told anyone anything. If anyone finds out, we'll both be fired for sure." Olga felt both relief and irritation. She didn't take her watchful eyes off him. "Something's wrong," she whispered, as if convincing herself that she wasn't the only one who thought that way. "Get out of the office, so no one suspects anything." "God forbid," he shook his head, as though even the thought of the risk made his head hurt, "and please, drink something calming. You're not yourself, you're paranoid." Olga stood there, confused, feeling awkward. The more she thought about it, the more tangled she became. Returning to her desk, she caught herself thinking that maybe she was going crazy, and that she really just needed to calm down. It could have just been stress, she repeated to herself over and over again, trying to pull herself together. On Thursday, she decided not to go for coffee and spend the day in the office, avoiding any random encounters. With each passing hour, she felt some relief. "Everything's fine," she repeated to herself, breathing out the tension. It seemed like everything was starting to normalize. When the workday came to an end, Olga left the office, feeling light. She slowly walked along the sidewalk toward the parking lot, mentally glad that this strange period was coming to an end, when she suddenly collided with a young guy, about 20, riding a scooter. The papers she was holding flew out of her hands and scattered across the asphalt. "Oh, sorry," Olga said, flustered, starting to pick up the papers. The guy stopped, smiled, and without hesitation helped her gather the documents. "Thank you," she said, not looking up. "I'm the one to blame, I was careless." He handed them back to her and, looking at her with a somewhat sly expression, smiled. "No problem," he said. "Sometimes all secrets come to light. By the way, I've heard about your generosity," he added with a barely concealed laugh. Olga's eyes darkened with anger, and she could no longer hold back, shouting, "You!" Grabbing the folder, she threw it straight at him. But the guy laughed loudly, skillfully dodged, and sped off on his scooter, leaving her standing in rage and despair. Struggling to compose herself, she got in her car and drove home. All evening, her nerves were on edge. She kept glancing anxiously at her phone as if expecting another surprise. Hundreds of questions raced through her mind, and unable to stand it anymore, she opened her laptop and started searching for a psychotherapist. She couldn't understand what was happening to her, but one thing was clear, she could no longer handle it on her own. On Friday morning, Olga arrived at work, feeling the tension tearing at her from within. Just the night before, it had seemed like she was on the brink of a breakdown, and now the only thought that kept her going was the upcoming weekend. She had even booked an appointment with a psychologist to try and cope with the mounting stress, but that meeting wouldn't be until next week. She prayed to herself, hoping that today would pass without incident. Indeed, the morning began quietly, and work absorbed her completely. Even the anxious thoughts faded into the background for a while. Olga began to think that maybe she had gotten through the worst of it and that all of this would gradually remain in the past. But as lunchtime approached, the calm was shattered by a new shock. A courier entered the office carrying a huge bouquet of scarlet roses, filling the air with their rich fragrance. Olga felt the eyes of her colleagues turn toward him, and then to her, as the guy confidently announced. "Delivery for Olga M." Everyone stared at her, clearly waiting for her reaction. Olga froze in place, a mixture of anger and panic boiling inside her. She rushed up to the courier, trying to hold back her rising irritation. "How did you know this is for me?" "I didn't order anything and I'm not expecting anything," she said. At that moment, a few curious female colleagues began to approach, as if specially to draw attention. The courier glanced at the card and read aloud. To the most magnificent and sexy woman, Olga M., from Igor. For a second, there was silence, and then soft laughter and whispers spread through the office. The colleagues began exchanging glances, some smirking. Unable to hold back, she erupted into a shout, directing a stream of curses at the courier. He was clearly stunned and began to retreat toward the door, trying to avoid further anger. The noise from her outburst quickly brought the office director, Vasily Ivanovich, into the room. Known for his strict demeanor and firm control over the team, he approached Olga with a stern look. He leaned down, picked up the card, and read it. His face twitched, but then he, as usual, gave a restrained smile and loudly addressed the gathered crowd. Well, there's been an incident, he said, glancing around at the employees. Someone made a bad joke. He turned to Olga as if trying to calm her. Olga, calm down, he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. You probably need to rest. Vasily Ivanovich tried to ease the tension with an awkward joke, and with a smirk, said. Let's get back to our places. No need to gather a crowd. And you, Olga, don't worry. It's just a joke. To make sure there are no doubts, you and Igor can take a lie detector test. This joke seemed to amuse the staff, and they started to disperse, smiling and chatting. But Olga couldn't hold back the trembling. Fear and anger overwhelmed her. Vasily Ivanovich hadn't even considered the possibility of a serious relationship between Olga and Igor. Her nerves were stretched to their breaking point, and something inside her snapped. Her psyche seemed to explode, and she shouted at the entire office. You can all go to hell. Yes, I'm sleeping with Igor. Great sex. Her voice trembled, but her eyes blazed with fire. You're all pathetic, gray rats, trembling with fear. You're all cowards, and I don't care about your opinions. Her scream echoed through the office, silencing everyone for a moment. Everything around froze. People looked at her in horror and confusion, unsure how to react. Vasily Ivanovich turned pale and cautiously sat down on the nearest chair, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He was shaken by her words. Silence fell in the office. As if by irony, Igor was not in the office at that moment. He had gone to another location to sign an important contract. Perhaps, if he had been there, Olga might have managed to hold herself together, but now, left alone against a crowd of curious employees, she could no longer bear it. Realizing there was nothing left for her to do there, Olga abruptly grabbed her bag and nervously headed for the exit, ignoring the frozen faces of her colleagues. At that very moment, Igor, having finished the deal, entered the office with a joyful expression on his face and bumped into Olga. She grabbed him by the hand and loudly said. Tell them we're lovers. Let them know everything. We're not like them, Igor. We're above this. We aren't afraid to show our real feelings. Igor froze, as if struck by lightning. A bewildered expression instantly appeared on his face. He pulled his hand from her grip and shot a worried glance at the gathered colleagues. They all stared at them. Olga, why did you tell them our secret? He muttered, trying to grasp what was happening. His words, spoken in complete silence, only confirmed everything she had just yelled. The colleagues exchanged disbelieving glances. In shock, Olga could no longer stay there. With tears in her eyes, she ran out of the office, slamming the door behind her. Igor, standing in the middle of the office, was in complete confusion, unsure how to handle the situation. He awkwardly ran a hand through his hair. His face expressed despair and fear. Colleagues behind him continued to whisper, saying that the consequences of their secret romance could no longer be hidden. As they walked behind them, the office buzzed with anxious chatter, all about what had just happened. Mikhail returned from his business trip, and Olga immediately attacked him with questions. She suspected he had orchestrated everything, but Mikhail just laughed. Then Olga grabbed a knife and began threatening him, but Mikhail knocked it out of her hand. In a fit of rage, Olga threw a chair out the window, breaking the glass and releasing some of her emotions in this futile act of destruction. When the police and ambulance arrived, they cautiously entered the house. Seeing the strangers, Olga appeared exhausted and, unable to hold it in, broke down in tears, collapsing onto the floor. She looked completely drained. Mikhail calmly explained to the police that his wife had been drinking and had a severe nervous breakdown. He subtly hinted that she might be suffering from delirium tremens after prolonged stress and drinking. He decided to keep quiet about the real incident for now. Olga spent almost a week in the hospital, where she received the necessary help and supportive therapy. With each passing day, her condition improved, and by the time of her discharge, she was ready to return home and start rebuilding her life. However, her encounter with reality turned out to be cold and harsh. Returning home, she discovered that Mikhail's belongings were gone, as well as his presence in the house that had once been their shared refuge. Her heart tightened with suspicion, and grabbing her phone, she immediately called Mikhail, not trying to hide her irritation in her voice. "Mikhail, what's going on here? Why are your things gone? Did you just leave without saying anything?" His voice was calm, even cold, and the polite tone felt like a blow. "Olga," he said, pausing to emphasize every word, "I just can't live with a woman who, due to her own infidelity, lost her mind." These words started to anger Olga, but then Mikhail added, "Olga, let's avoid the drama. Let's meet in court. I've already prepared the documents. And by the way, I've put our house up for sale. I insist that we split the proceeds 80 to 20, 80 for me, 20 for you, and that will be fair." What she heard was very displeasing to Olga. She didn't want to easily let go of what she had worked so hard for. "I warn you, Mikhail, if you're planning to get a divorce, don't expect any 80%. The minimum you can get, if we agree to split everything in half, or you get nothing at all after everything you've done. I have the right to demand the larger share." Mikhail, clearly expecting such a reaction, smirked and replied with a barely perceptible mockery in his voice. "Olga, first of all, I didn't do anything, and you drove yourself to this. And second, Olga, remember when you decided to play dangerous games with a knife?" His voice turned icy. "We have cameras in the house, which you've probably forgotten about, and everything was perfectly recorded. So now I have every right to demand a divorce with terms that are favorable for me. Don't want to accept my terms? Then I don't know. I'll write a report on you for threatening someone's life, or I'll give you time to think." Her protests and anger didn't change anything. It became clear that Mikhail had trapped her in a situation with no way out. After that, she begged him to forgive her, tried to persuade him to agree to a fairer division of the property, but Mikhail remained unyielding. In the following months, the divorce process went relatively smoothly. Olga received her share, 20%, and came to terms with it. During these moments, he remained cool and neutral. Due to the scandal at work, Olga and Igor lost their positions. The company, which valued its name, principles, and rules, couldn't overlook such a situation and, without hiding its outrage, parted ways with them. Their careers were ruined, and attempts to restore their reputation were futile. Their past was now associated with humiliating failure. Mikhail achieved what he wanted. He taught Olga and her friend Igor a harsh lesson, turning her betrayal into her own destruction. However, inside him was emptiness, a void that revenge couldn't fill. The passing years, memories of past happiness, none of it vanished without a trace, leaving a shadow of regret in his heart. And although his mind coldly told him about justice, part of his soul longed for the love they once had.